Welcome to the Secure Connections podcast, sponsored by IoTSSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. I'm Brian Sherman, Content Director for IoTSSA, and joining me today is our co-host, the renowned channel expert, Tanya Shepard. Good day, Tanya.
Hi, Brian. How's it going over there back east?
Do you really want to know?
I do.
Great. So snow and ice have arrived here in Pennsylvania, and I'm certainly not ready for the slip and slide, which is today's experience. Struggling to find snow scrapers, snow shovels, de-icer for the sidewalk. I'm a little behind this year, so we could use a little sunshine to thaw us out. How about things on the West Coast?
Well, how about I ship you some California sunshine? How's that? We're doing just fine.
I would appreciate that. Is it sunny today?
It's gorgeous, actually, and the leaves are turning, but it's still really quite lovely at about 65 degrees, so not bad at all.
Good. Well, I hate to leave our guest waiting today, and we are very pleased to be joined by our special guest, Brad Gross, one of the most knowledgeable attorneys in the field of IT services, and more specifically, the channel. In addition to his role as founder and president of the law office of Bradley Gross, he's a noted speaker and author on a variety of tech-related legal topics. I most recently had the opportunity to sit in on Brad's session at the Continuum Navigate conference in Pittsburgh. I believe he also did the West Coast show for them last month too. Everyone was in tune to the discussion so much you could hear a pin drop. So I'm looking forward to getting a little bit of that energy today and exploring some of those same topics, including how MSPs can eliminate their legal liability when offering security services. So welcome to the Secure Connections podcast, Brad.
Thank you. Good to be here. I'd also send you some sunshine from Florida. Right?
Yeah, sure. Both of you rub it in today, but no, I love where I live, but there's times that that first snow sometimes catches you off guard when it's a little early in the season, but it'll all be good.
I think Brad beats me on the temperature gauge, though.
A little bit.
Well, let's kick off. We'd love to hear about you, Brad. I know that lots and lots of people know about you, but do you mind just giving us a little bit of a history, your background, and then how you came to? I mean, there's so many areas of legal advice one can go into. How did you get into IT and security? And give us some background.
All right. So. First of all, thanks for having me on today. It is a pleasure to be here. I started out, 41 years ago. 41 years ago at the age of 10, so you can do the math there, as a mini hacker. I was a little hacker with the glasses and the big hair, sitting at a desk typing away on a TRS-80 Model 1 Level 2. For those of you who would remember that, who are listening to it, you're probably at least in your 40s. And so what I do was sort of a merger of what I like to do and what I went to school to do. So I'm not an attorney that understands computers. I'm a hacker that went to law school. So that's the benefit of what I bring to the table. And so now I spend my days talking about IT strategy and risk reduction and helping companies in the IT space research and innovate and develop their products and lower their liabilities. And it's fun because it's sort of what I grew up doing. The other benefit of what I do is, as long as disruptors are the big thing now, the big trend, I disrupt law firm experience. That's what I do. We don't, for example, we don't wear suits. I'm probably overdressed right now for this podcast. We don't spend a lot of time picking out ties or figuring out how to bill clients for 4 attorneys at a time. We understand technology. I got programmers on staff who are also attorneys. And so it's fun, merging what you know how to do and what you like to do with what you do for a living. Not too many people can say they do that, but I do.
That's a refreshing thought as far as how you run your business, especially in the channel. I think everybody's fairly comfortable and likes to work with others that may not be, always the buttoned up and buttoned down. Question for you: do you still have that original computer that you?
I do. TRS-80 Model 1 Level 2 sits in my office right now. The only thing I had to do is replace the power supply, which I found on eBay. And it uses a tape drive. I mean, it's in the Smithsonian. I saw it in the when I was at Microsoft a couple of months ago, they have it in their museum as well, the exact model. My the webcam that we're using probably has more RAM and technology in it than that had, but it was a good foundation. It was a good foundation that really put me where I am today. So
it is. It gives you legit cred too in the channel. I mean, that's not a bad thing. You're working as kind of a peer.
You walk around saying TRS-80, people are like, okay, all right, this is no joke. This is no Commodore 64. This goes back a good 10 years before that. So yeah.
Very good. And I know you work with a variety of different companies too. So MSPs, you have MSPs for clients, IT service providers, VARs, vendors. There's a host of gamut. So let's go a little deeper into some of the services you provide. I know in the past you've done, you focused a lot on agreements and other things, but can you expand on that a little bit for what you provide, for example, in MSPs?
Sure. What we do is we handle all kinds of transactional work for channel companies. And the idea behind it is that we help reduce risk, we help reduce liability, we manage the customer expectations through agreements, right, through the transactions. We do merger and acquisitions, employment law, pretty much any transactional activity that a tech company, an MSP, a service provider would need. That's what we do. And the benefit, of course, is that when we walk in, we understand what you do or what the MSP does at the grassroots level. Like I said, we could actually probably sit down and program things if they really needed to. So when we get involved in an area or a matter for an MSP, they know that they have kind of a tsunami of experience behind them coming in. And that's what we do for MSPs across the country. We are, I like to say, while it's not a formal poll, having done this now for 18 years, representing tech companies, we represent, if you took all the MSPs of all the law firms and added them up, we represent more than that. I have no doubt. We represent almost 1,000 over the past 18 years. So it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's fun.
Wow, that's a lot. That's fantastic. And
we've advised at least 1,000.
Yeah,
busy.
We obviously in the industry, and we're all seeing it, lots of movement towards security. I mean, this has been going on for decades, so nothing new there particularly. But now what is rather modern is this sort of move towards cybersecurity liability and insurance and where people should go. And we're sort of watching people develop their programs and all the other things to protect their infrastructure, the MSP, as well as their clients. So there's this sort of double thing going on, right? Protect your house first. What should they be thinking from a legal standpoint to really get going, to sort of balance out the physical versus the legal aspects of this, Brad?
Yeah. Well, so I think that what we first have to acknowledge is that as far as security is concerned, MSPs are a direct vector to their clients, right, to their customers. Whereas it used to be that the threat was to the customers themselves, and so the customers sought security solutions and so on. Well, now you have to think, if you're an MSP, you have to think beyond that, because now you, as an MSP, you are the target. Homeland Security just put out a memo, about a month or two ago, 2 months now, for the first time, actually saying, you, MSPs, you are the target right now. You are the ones that need to be concerned. You're a direct vector in, so now you have to secure, like you just said, your own house. Now, once we acknowledge that MSPs need to protect themselves both because they are a target and they're also being looked at from their customers as, hey, you're our protector too. Make sure you do the right thing. Once you put that into perspective, you can begin to take steps to lower liability, right? Or reduce it or eliminate it. Focusing just for a moment on the customer angle. Right? Customer MSP. Customers looking to the MSP and saying, hey, you're our protector. We're relying on you to provide a security solution. And the MSP is sitting there, the owner is sitting there at night thinking, how am I going to do this? Right? Or, what to do. I think that the very first thing that MSPs need to do at a foundational level is they have to think about what forms the basis of the relationship between the MSP and the customer. Right? What forms the relationship? Answer, the agreement. So the agreement forms the relationship. It is the agreement that exists or should exist between the MSP and the customer that will ultimately decide the level of liability that an MSP has. It is the agreement that they need to focus on first. Then they can start looking in-house as well. But I think that for our purposes today, MSPs really need to think about their service agreement and how it should be structured and how it should be worded to either reduce or in some cases entirely eliminate liability.
That's a good point, Brad. And I want to get back to those agreements shortly because I think that's the crux of not just your discussion, but where the liability rises. Question for you back to the FBI warnings, the Homeland Security warnings for MSPs. The fact that those warnings have come out, does that raise the liability level for MSPs?
That's a good question. So and it's a question that I would ask, that I would expect a plaintiff's attorney to ask, and trust me, they are asking that themselves. It's one thing for an MSP to say, "Hey, we didn't know," right? As an industry, we didn't know this could happen. So our standard of care, the standard that they need to meet on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, it is at one level. But once it is real, once the government is warning you, this is not just the industry. This is not just self-regulation. Now you're looking at a government regulatory authority or a government prosecutorial authority or an enforcement authority. And they step in and say, we know you are now the target. You need to be aware. You should be taking steps. I would say that the bar has been raised significantly. So yes, I think when the government steps in and these kinds of not regulations, but warnings are released, I would say the duty of care has risen significantly, and MSPs need to take note of it, because you know who is taking note of it? Plaintiffs' attorneys. They're taking note of it. And I think that the next big wave of litigation is about to hit us, and MSPs need to be aware of that.
So you talked about regulations, and we obviously go into compliance and regulations a lot within our industry, and especially at IoTSSA here. So how's that being affected? I mean, what's the legal ramifications of new GDPR? And I use that, and it's a bit obviously more in Europe. We're here in California, we're experiencing it, but what are the legal ramifications of all these brand new compliances and just getting updated year upon year, right?
Right. So, regulation is a funny thing because there's both too much of it and too little. All right, too little, meaning that a lot of the laws that that you're hearing about, the pundits are writing about, these privacy laws, the state laws, California's revising its law. Nevada has one that's coming out. New York just passed one that's one of the strictest around. In truth, if you read them, and I've done a podcast on this exact topic, they don't apply to MSPs. So everyone is worried about these laws, and they don't apply to MSPs. On the flip side, all right, the regulation that is out there, and you hit on some of it, right? GDPR, you have HIPAA, high tech, you have Graham-Leach-Bliley, Sarbanes-Oxley, and so forth. The stuff that's out there, I think that MSPs are approaching it, for the most part, wrong. They're not approaching it the right way. And this is one of the things that, Brian, you may have heard me talk about it when you heard me speak a couple of weeks ago. MSPs, in their zeal to get the job in the door, right, to differentiate themselves from their competitors, they are making statements about regulatory compliance that they shouldn't be making. Let me make something very clear. No one listening to this podcast, nobody knows all the laws, okay? And even if they think they understand the law, they don't. There are nuances to the law. There are exceptions to the law, whatever it is, HIPAA, even PCI compliance, not a law, but a contractual regulation. There are so many nuances, you don't know the law. But what MSPs are doing is they are advertising themselves as regulatory compliance solutions. They're coming out with, marketing campaigns that say, don't worry, we'll make you compliant, right? Or you will be fully compliant with whatever it is. In truth, they shouldn't be making those claims. What they should be saying, all right, so if you're, watching the webinar, get your pen out and start writing this down. What you should be saying is not that you offer a regulatory compliance solution, but that the solution you offer is compliant with a regulation. Very big difference.
Excellent distinction.
Yeah, very big difference. It's one thing to say, we will make you compliant. Well, no, you won't. And you don't even know all the laws that you need to work into the equation. That's one thing. You don't want to say that. What you can say is, we're going to offer you, pick a solution, whatever it is, right? That is one step. It is one of the tools that you will need to become compliant, and we offer you that. And it's compatible with whatever law we're talking about. That is a great way to lower your liability. You're not making promises you can't keep. You're not overemphasizing what you can do. And at the same time, you're managing your customers' expectations. So should something go wrong, they don't turn around and say, hey, I thought we were going to be compliant. No. Our solution that we're offering you is compliant, but you need a comprehensive solution. We're not offering that. It also gives you an opportunity to market a comprehensive solution if you have one.
So that brings up a good point, Brad, because I think you're speaking somewhat of confidence. And how much does or at least claims that an MSP may make, how much does an MSP's confidence in their security expertise factor into liability as well? So if something were bad to occur to their clients, for example, is there repercussions coming back because they promoted themselves as cybersecurity experts and maybe they didn't have it all down as much as they should?
I mean, look, having confidence is great. And I'm not saying that people should walk in sort of, in a timid fashion. You could be confident, but your confidence needs to be based on both tangible and intellectual honesty, right? And the way to achieve that is to have agreements in place that manage customer expectations and then have the technical background and ability to perform under those contracts. And when you have that in place, right, when you have the contracts in place, you have the ability to perform and so forth, you're not going to be called to the mat on liability very often because you have managed expectations. You have addressed the reality. Going back to my example, if you have told the customer in a very clear way, we're not offering you a fully comprehensive regulatory solution. You may need one. That's not what we're offering you. We're offering you a BDR solution that is compliant with HIPAA, that is compliant with GDPR. We'll sign a BA agreement, right? Business associate agreement with regard to the BDR. For your other services, that's up to you. Something to that effect. You can rest easy. You can be very confident at that point. You can advertise a compliant solution, but not a regulatory solution. You can go to bed at night knowing that you're not going to be called to task. You're not going to be spending money on attorneys.
So we're really getting into the agreements a lot here, and reducing liability with your master services agreement, with your statements of work and what have you. Can you talk a little bit more, get a bit more granular about that, Brad, to really give some advice to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So, all right. Every MSP, every managed service provider listening to this broadcast needs to have an MSA, a master service agreement, not a managed service agreement, a master. And it is going to be that company's constitution. It governs everything that company does, whether you are doing RMM, BDR, block of hours, a security solution, it doesn't really matter. Every company has an MSA, master service agreement, governing everything it does. And it's going to cover that company in two different ways. Legal, right, the law, and what I call realities. And this is what I speak about all the time. Law, realities. On the legal end, that's your limitation of liability. That's your limited warranties, right? Indemnification, all that stuff that lawyers like to write. And that's important. It's very important. But that's not where the issues arise. And when it comes to lowering security risk related to security, that's not where it arises. It arises in realities. Realities are where you're actually providing a service to a customer. You're doing something, right? You are providing a security solution. You are analyzing the endpoint security. You are doing something with the customer. And when that happens, there's going to be some friction. And where there's friction, there are problems. And your MSA needs to address those problems, what I call realities, right? Like the client that doesn't understand that you're not offering a regulatory compliance solution, right? The client that doesn't understand that no security paradigm is 100% foolproof. There is no security paradigm on the market today, and I don't care which vendor you pick. They're all great, right? Throw them out there. You know what it is? They're all great. None of them are 100% foolproof. Your customer doesn't understand that. I understand it. You Tanya, you understand it. Brian understands it. We understand it. People listening to this, but the customers don't. So what you need to do is have an MSA that addresses that reality. that says to the customer, if we provide you with a security solution, know this, nothing is 100%. And that you might do things that will actually circumvent what we're doing. That could cause a problem. And then I'll have clients say, well, do we tell them? What? Yeah, you tell them. How is this? Customer, if you download something that circumvents then known industry virus definitions, we can't stop it. We're not responsible for it. Tell them why? Because it's true. It's true. And if you read any of the service agreements that you, the MSP, signed with any of your upstream providers, like Webroot, like Symantec, like Huntress, any of them, right? They're all great. They all say what I'm telling you to put in your agreement, that nothing is foolproof, that things can be circumvented. And if it's circumvented, it's the way it goes. So if it's important to Webroot, it's important to Symantec, it's important to Huntress, it's important to all Continuum, right? Don't you think it's important to you as an MSP, right? Don't you think it is? Of course it is. So you need to have an MSA that addresses the law and addresses the security realities, all right? That's the MSA. Then you have statements of work. Statements of work are deliverable documents. They are not agreements, okay? They might refer to the master agreement. They refer to that constitution, but they are not agreements. They are simply deliverable documents about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, how much you're going to charge for it, when it starts, when it stops. That's it. Okay? So if you're doing a statement of work, for example, for a security solution, I don't want to see things like indemnification and warranty and, I have to make it 20 pages long because I'm worried about if your MSA is written correctly and your statement of work incorporates the MSA, right, all you have to do is put the service down. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. By the way, we're not giving you a regulatory solution. This is a step toward it. We're giving you a malware solution. It's listed here. By the way, nothing is 100%. You understand that if you do the following things, that's not covered under this statement of work, right? Sign below. Boom. Now you're off to the races. Now you have established a contractual paradigm that protects you from a legal perspective, a reality perspective. It manages expectations through a statement of work, and you're good to go. Every MSP should be doing that.
Brilliant. And what might sound like a very obvious question here, I mean, we've walked through it a bit. I would imagine that you will help the MSPs put these together, because I know a lot of them actually, use quite generic ones, and they'll replace bits and pieces here just to reflect who they are and possibly who the client is. But is that something you help? And talk to us a little bit about when you get a new client through and some of the steps that you do go through with them.
Sure. So yes, so we do MSAs and statements of work all the time. The issue of, you mentioned generic documents that they find online, or they'll get through, toolkits and so forth that are, bundled everything together and so on. I'm not necessarily against those if you're using them to educate yourself and educate your company about the issues that are out there. But no one should be relying on those. No one should be relying on them, okay? There are too many risks. There are too many variables. There are too many different types of services with varying degrees of service levels, right? Varying security solutions, to just take one of these things off the internet. But if you're going to take it and say, well, I used it to educate myself, now I got an idea of what I'm kind of sort of going for, great. For those MSPs that have had service agreements in place forever, and now they're a little bit concerned that they're not protected, that's okay. I understand that a lot of companies, have these agreements that got them from point A to point today. I get that. Okay. That doesn't mean that they should continue using those agreements. It doesn't mean it's going to get them where they want to be in the future. So what we do, we review MSAs, statements of work all the time, rewrite them, revise them, tweak them, to make sure that they are updated with the latest law and the latest realities. All of these realities that we have seen representing hundreds of MSPs over the years. And I'll tell you that as far as MSPs, if you're listening, you're thinking, well, I'm a little embarrassed. My agreement isn't so great. Okay, let me tell you this. I have MSPs that will come up to me at a speaking event and they'll say, well, I'd like you to look at our agreement. An attorney wrote it, right? The same attorney that did the real estate closing and the will on their, right, for their estate or something. All right, he also wrote my MSA. Great. But they'll say, it's probably pretty good. Could you take a look? And we look, and it's awful. I mean, you can't believe an attorney wrote it. Then we'll get MSPs that will say, I sort of stole this from like 3 other people that I know, and I pieced it together. And sometimes we'll look and we'll say, it's actually not bad. It's actually not bad. You hit the realities. You need to tweak it a bit, but so MSPs should not be embarrassed, I guess is the message I'm sending. They shouldn't be embarrassed to send us their MSAs for us to take a look at them and so on. Improving yourself, what do they say? The first step of improvement is acknowledging the problem. Acknowledge that you have the problem, that you stole someone else's MSA or you borrowed it or something. Acknowledge the problem, and then we can help you fix it. And you need to fix it because the plaintiff's attorneys are out there. They're out there.
Besides acknowledging it, they're talking to an attorney, so you can't disclose whose was that bad, right? I mean, you have that advantage.
Well, I'm going to give you the following attorneys that really screwed things up.
But that's a great point. But going back to that is how often should MSPs and even MSSPs revisit or revise their key documents like their MSAs and statements?
So if it's written correctly, an MSA does not need to be revisited every year or even every other year. I would say every 3 to 4 years, if it's written correctly, the MSA should just be reviewed to make sure that not only that the laws haven't changed, because laws don't change every year. They just don't, at least not the laws relevant to MSPs.
Even in California?
Yeah, even in crazy California. California, like I said, revises its data protection, its privacy laws. But like I said, I just did a podcast on this. Almost all the time, it doesn't affect MSPs. Almost all.
Okay.
If there's obviously a concern, if you're hearing the news that some new thing is out there, you check in. Great. But generally speaking, 3 to 4 years, that's when the realities change. Right? 3 to 4 years ago, for example, if you went to the big industry events, and I've spoken to them, I know you guys attend them as well, the big thing was about M&A, growth, right? Growing, and so on. Now, 3 years later, the big thing is about security, right? Maybe 3 years from now, it'll be something else, whatever it is. So you have to keep up with the realities, and I think that every 3 to 4 years is the right time.
And as a follow-up to that, too, you mentioned M&A. How does that fit into this, too? So if I'm an MSP and I'm merging with another,
right?
What do I need to know when I come to see you, Brian?
Okay, so if you are looking to be acquired, then you should know that acquiring companies want to see that you have the right contracts in place. They are not impressed with the number of customers you have. You could turn around and say, we are monitoring and managing 50,000 endpoints. Oh, great. Sounds good. Let me see your contract. Well, we work on purchase orders and invoices. Yeah. Bye-bye. That deal just went south. You could have 100,000 endpoints. You could have 300,000 endpoints. You're working on purchase orders. You're working on invoices. No good. Similarly, companies that have really kind of junky, old, outdated agreements in place, sometimes that's worse than having no agreements in place. So the first thing that you need to know is that if you're an MSP looking to be acquired or looking to position yourself to be acquired, you need to have agreements in place. It gives you credibility. It reduces your liability. It reduces risk. And acquiring companies like reduced risk. That's the whole idea. It's very rare that an acquiring company says, you are going to be sued. You are in a lot of trouble. How much? Right? No, that doesn't happen. You're looking for low-risk companies with high profitability. That's what you want. On the flip side, if you are acquiring companies, if you are a company, an MSP that is acquiring somebody else, that's what you need to look at. Your due diligence. First question out of the box. Do you have agreements? Second question, can we see them? Right? I want to know what risk is out there. I want to know how you have allocated that risk because the future is coming and the future is going to involve privacy litigation. It's going to involve security breach litigation. And as an acquiring company, you want to know what you're getting yourself into. So in the M&A area, this plays a very, very big role. Very big.
So the bottom line is really all about the contract, the agreement between you and your client. Make sure it's solid and tight. We've covered quite a lot today, Brad. What else can you give as key takeaways to our MSPs or MSSPs listening today?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Well, we've covered the agreement between the MSP and the customer. MSPs also need to be aware of one other thing, right? That they need to have their own house in order, that they need to be protected against the disastrous consequences that could come when they themselves are targeted by hackers. And the thing that I think that we need to push and impress on MSPs is not just focusing on the customer end, which is important, right? Focus on internal processes. And by that, I mean everyone listening to this broadcast should have an incident response plan in place. An incident response plan that they are going to follow, that company will follow if and or when they detect a breach of their own system. The time to figure out what you're going to do is not when a breach has occurred. Okay? You need to have a plan in place that says, if we have a breach, which could put our customers at risk, remember that, this is the deal. Here's our computer emergency response team. Here's who's on it. Here's their phone numbers. Here's how we're going to identify a breach. Here's how we're going to handle it, whether we're going to quarantine it, whether we're going to eradicate it, and so forth. Here is how we're going to talk to the press or the government or customers that are calling, right? Here's how we're going to do things. And once it's done, once the threat has been eradicated, we are now going to have a process by which we're going to figure out what worked and what didn't, what I call the post-mortem, right? You're going to figure out at the end what worked and what didn't. And that belongs in your incident response plan. If you don't have one, you need to have one. And if you have one, make sure it tells a good story, beginning, middle, and end. What do we do in the beginning? How do we handle things in the middle? What do we do at the end? And make sure you practice it at least once a year. I just read an article about a company that once or twice a year, what they do is they shut down their systems. They shut it down as if they were under attack. And then they practice, what are we going to do? It's brilliant. That's brilliant. And they don't always announce that they're going to do it to their employees. They just come in and boom, they're shut down. Now what? Well, don't we have a plan? Yes, we do. That's the right answer. And they follow their plan. You do that, right? You do that and you couple that kind of internal process with strong customer agreements, you are creating one hell of a security paradigm for yourself, and you'll be in very good shape. Yeah.
Fantastic advice, Brad. So obviously, unfortunately, we run out of time too soon when it comes to the podcast. I wish we could go much longer, but we want to wrap for today. How can IT service companies get in touch with you? And what's your next channel speaking event? Where can we see you anytime?
Okay, so they could get in touch with us a number of ways. They could go to the website, right? www.bradleygross.com. I have a technology broadcast. Brad, not podcast, but broadcast.
Nice.
I'm very clever.
Love it.
Very clever. Yeah, www.technologybroadcast.com. It is a podcast devoted to MSPs on exactly the issues that we're talking about here. They could give us a ring, 954-217-6225. Give us a ring. We'd love to hear from you guys. My next engagements, wow. I've been at Continuum, ConnectWise, Ninja, ASCII Group. You know what? I think I'm done for 2019, but we'll see where we're going to be in 2020. I hope to see everyone out there in 2020 as well.
That's awesome. But we definitely appreciate you coming on. So on behalf of IoTSSA, Tanya and I would like to thank channel expert and attorney Brad Gross for joining us on this episode of the Secure Connections podcast. We wish you all a safe, secure, and profitable day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Brad.